Hey, everybody, welcome to the next part of our team website project. And so far to this point, we've learned a little bit of vocabulary. Right now, wireframe, I believe, is about the extent of our vocabulary. And as you might remember, wireframe is essentially our blueprint for a website. It's something where we can think about layout without having to think about code. So we wireframed up our homepage, which in Photoshop came out just about like this. And next up, as you might guess from our nav bar here, is the roster page. So the roster page, when it is framed out, is going to look something like this. It's similar in a lot of aspects. Actually, the only thing that is different is the content inside of our container of that main body of the document. Now, in this one, we're going to also talk, if you look at the vocabulary, we're going to start to talk a little bit about what responsive web design is, and then what a media query would be, as well as our viewport, and the rest of our vocabulary here, the viewport, the meta tags, our viewport meta tag, and all of those things. So what we're first going to do, before we get too much into that, we're going to wireframe out the actual desktop version of our roster page, and then we'll dive a little bit into the responsive part. So, Photoshop, to set this up the right way, what we're going to do is we're going to do just a new file. We're going to go up to File, we're going to do New. And in this new file, we're going to set it up a little bit more like a computer screen. And then we're going to also set up the part where it's actually going to look like a cell phone screen. Oh, good, I did click it. Just took forever. So for web, with this one, we're going to go all the way up. We'll say 1600 for this one. Approximately what a computer screen would be. And then we're actually going to go for 900. Actually, we'll go a little bit bigger. We'll go about 1200. Just so we have a little bit extra room. White background. The one button you have to make sure is clicked is right here is Artboards. We want that check mark. If you don't have that check mark, this one is not going to go so hot. It's going to be kind of awkward. So we're going to call this the team roster page. And I'm just going to go ahead and create that one. Now, we did actually have most of our work done already. We'll talk about that in just a second. But right now, we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about artboards a little bit. So for this one, we're going to have two artboards. That's exactly what you would think of. Think about it as like a piece of construction paper back in the day when people used paper for things. So it's like two separate pieces of paper inside of a file. And the purpose for ours is we're going to have a computer screen and then a cell phone screen. So on our move tool, top tool, we're going to go ahead and right click, and we're going to, as opposed to having the move tool, we're going to go for the artboard tool. So this one, if we click on artboard 1, it tells us we're 1600 by 1200. So we're going to go and we're going to click this little interesting fishy shaped thing to go ahead and add a new artboard. We're just going to click over to the right of this. Now you can actually drag that up because we definitely don't want it to be way lower. So we'll drag it up so it's nice and even. But then we're going to go, since we have a computer screen and a cell phone screen, they're obviously going to be very different sizes. Sorry, having trouble moving my screen. So for this one, we're going to go right click again for our artboard tool. I clicked away. And if you have artboard 2 selected over in your layers, you're going to change it. So cell phone screen, we're going to approximate to be 600 pixels wide, and then we'll keep it at 1200 pixels high. So you can actually see that this is a pretty good comparison about what a computer versus a cell phone would look like. It's obviously a very, very different experience. So we're going to, as web designers, we'd definitely have to make sure that we design those in a different way. Now you should, when it comes up, you should have these little plus buttons to add artboards. In this case, we're not going to add any more. You could add one for like a tablet screen, about 768 pixels or so. We're not going to do that right now. That's too much. I just want to introduce you to the concept. So back to our other Photoshop document that we did, the team homepage. We've already done a lot of what we need to do. So you're going to right click. We're going to go back to the move tool for this. We already have a good amount. We have a lot of photoshopping that we've done that we can reuse. So over here, what you should have is you should have all your layers from your original document. So I'm going to click rectangle 4 is my top. Team website homepage is my bottom. You don't need this background layer. Control C will copy those. And on your roster page, Control V will paste. Oops. Now, the one thing you have to be careful of, do Control Z if you did that, like I just did. You have to make sure Artboard 1 is clicked. So click on Artboard 1 and then do Control V. So then you get that entire Photoshop. All those layers are pasted in. Now we're just going to go down and dirty with this one. We're going to go ahead and just resize. And obviously it does not look the way that it necessarily should. That's okay for us. It's fine. It's just a wireframe. It's nothing too serious. So this is just for the layout. So first thing to change, of course, as opposed to team homepage, we're going to double click on this T right over here. This is no longer the, oops, sorry, extra click in there. No longer the home page, this is the roster page. And then check mark to commit that change for our text. Inside of nav, actually, we change nothing because nav bar, once you have it, it just goes on to each page the same way without change. So the only changes really then are inside of container. So I'm going to hit my little arrow next to container where all of my container layers are. And I'm going to first double click on this team homepage. Again, this is the roster page. And again, check mark. So if you're confused as to what I'm doing, over here on their layers panel, right over here, you have this little T. If you double click on that, then you can edit the text directly. It's a nice little shortcut, especially in this case when we're deleting and changing. So rectangle 3, if you hit the little eyeball, you just make sure that should be the banner. This page does not need a banner. So click on rectangle 3, delete it. Rectangle 2 is actually our container outline. We do need that. We do not need ellipse pictures and descriptions. So the rest of the stuff inside of container we're actually going to delete. So back on Team Roster, back on the Move tool, hold down your Shift button, and we need to move this actually up to the top of our container, because that's where it is going to reside. So Control S at this point. Save your file. Make sure that your changes are not indeed lost. And then I have not done a save yet. That moment on camera when I realize I'm not good at alphabetical order. So we have team websites. Always make sure that you save in your folder. Keep everything together. It's just better that way. So, next part of the wireframe is, that's the wrong button. We have these little content boxes right here. We have an image on the left, then a player name and a description. It's a setup that we have used before. So what we're going to do is we're just going to draw one, and then we're going to copy it down 3 more times. That way we don't have to do extra work. So on here, first up is right-click on the rectangle tool. Yours might be something different. Could be the ellipse. Mine is the rectangle. So our first thing is an image. We'll say something that looks like that. Now we have one more rectangle that we need. If you right-click on the just regular rectangle tool, we're going to put a little heading with a background color, which I like to do. We're going to take that up in the fill. We're not going to make that gray. That's not an image. We're just going to make that black, because black to me is just a content box. Gray is an image. So we're going to go ahead. Remember, you never want to put text in with that little circle thing. Just click underneath it. And this one is going to be, this is a roster page, so this is going to be the name of a player. I'm going to go ahead, check mark, save that, and I'm going to make that a little larger, so we'll call it maybe like 48. And I'm going to Control-T, transform it, and move it up into the actual content box. And then we realize that it's black text on a black background, so we change the color to white. And we should have that. So next, we have the other kind of text box that we're going to be drawing. So if you click and drag, you'll actually add a text box. So player description. So one day I'm going to remember to change my text color before I start typing. That day is apparently not today. So it'll put our player description goes here. Our other text was centered. We want this one to be more left justified. And that is our setup. So what we're going to do inside of here, description, name, and our 2 rectangles that we just drew should have 4 things together. Control-G. Group inside of a group. And this one is going to be, we'll call this a content box. So that way we know that all of the stuff that goes inside of that box is there. It's easier to see. So with content box clicked, go ahead and go to your move tool, then Alt-Shift, just to drag it out. Now, in this case, we actually, I think, need a little bit of extra space. So what I'm going to go do is I'm going to go up to the Artboard tool again. I'm going to go to Artboard 1, and as opposed to 12, we're going to take that up to maybe like 1800 pixels, which actually is not necessarily enough. Let's go about 2300. That's too much, but that's all right. We'll take it in the middle. We'll go about 1900, which technically probably isn't the middle, but oh well. So we have our footer, which is somewhere. This rectangle 4, let's change the name of that to footer while we're doing this. If you just double click on the name, we can do that. So with our move tool and our shift button, we're going to drag it down. So our footer's on the bottom of the page. Uh-oh. It got a little difficult on me. So footer's on the bottom, and then the other thing we need to resize is inside of our container, our rectangle 2 is actually footer, or the container, I'm sorry. So let's make that a little bit bigger too. So we have our content box back. We're still on the move tool, so all this stuff actually goes pretty easily with you on the move tool. For our content box, Alt Shift, and then we're just going to keep dragging it down. And what I do for that is I let it go, and then if you click again and drag, then you can actually go ahead and you can copy it. One more time, keep copying it down the page. So that's our wireframe for the roster. That's about what it's going to look like there. So on the other cell phone screen, though, it's going to be a little bit different. So go ahead and hit the arrow next to Artboard 1. We want all of that stuff to be hidden. And on Artboard 2, go ahead and click. So on the top of Artboard 2, we're going to start with our text. And we're going to say team website. And then again, we will say roster page. The text is not going to be able to change. So I'll check mark. And then on the top, it's gray. We want it to be black. The text won't necessarily change from one to the other. What will change is the size of the text, because something that's at 48-point font on a computer screen is going to look ridiculous on a cell phone screen. And it might very well actually size it a little for you, but I wouldn't count on it. So let's go ahead and do 36. Make it just a little bit smaller, and I'll Control T. I'll move it up just a little bit higher on the screen too. So nav bar as well is another thing. You don't want this to be like so small that people can't see it. So generally speaking, for a nav bar, actually it goes and they do this thing where it toggles, where it slides up and down. We're not going to put the toggling part in. It's just a little too early in our web design careers for that. So we're going to make it like pre-toggle. So with a rectangle tool, go ahead and we're going to draw a black rectangle. And this is actually going to be nav right here. So with our text, I'm going to go ahead, novel idea of changing the text color before I write it. And I'm going to left justify this as well. So home. And Control T. I actually have to zoom in a little bit here. Control plus, remember, zooms it in. And these get difficult to drag sometimes. Okay, so one more time, Control T. And it does not seem to really want me to do this through it. So I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger, to make it less difficult. I don't know what its problem is today. So as you can see, our text size right here, when I made it, it's like 70 point. That does not work. Probably something in this case, more like 36 again, would work out pretty okay. So home, and in this case, we're going to actually change some CSS properties here. To make them, as opposed to the inline display, we're going to make them actually block displays again. So Alt Shift, with the move tool, Alt Shift. This thing is being really difficult. I'm so sorry. Let's do this in a different way. So say home, and down here in the bottom, we should have an option to duplicate, which as things go, we don't at the moment. So let's just right click and duplicate our layer. And if we double click on the T here, we're going to call this one roster. check mark, Control T, and we're just going to use our arrow key to move it down. I'll zoom in one more, maybe it'll, two more, maybe it'll make it easier. So we'll try Alt-Shift again. Finally, something works. Happy day. So we have roster, we have gallery. If we double click on the T here, and then the last one, as we have it, is history. So again, Alt-Shift, copy it, double click on the T, call it history. So we have a little too much extra nav here. Click on our rectangle 6, and we're just going to click on this little arrow here and do that. Make it a little smaller. So we have here rectangle 6 up to history, shift click, Control G to group it, call it nav. Now what we can actually do, we'll shortcut a little bit here for our content box and stuff like that. It's actually not going to be overly different. It's going to be smaller. Everything will be smaller. So content box, we'll just click on the copy here. Control C to copy your content box. Click back onto Artboard 2. And we're going to do Control V to paste it. And this is a good example of why exactly we would need to do responsive web design, is because this clearly doesn't fit. So we'll say bottom left corner here, hold down Shift and drag it to resize. And I'll do the same thing from the other one. So we're just going to go ahead and we're going to make it a little bit smaller so it fits more on the screen. Now I know that we didn't necessarily get container on there, but we'll do that at the end. So Alt-Shift, we need 4 content boxes. And then at the bottom, we need one last black rectangle. So we actually change this fill up here, start, and that is, of course, going to be our footer. There is indeed ways in the end to make content go away, but it is actually something that we don't need to talk about yet. So I guess we'll leave the container off in this case. What we're going to do is on the smaller page size, what you have is you have the container shrinking the page. You actually don't want that to happen on the smaller page. You want it to actually expand out. So there's our wireframe for our actually roster page here for 2 screen sizes. Control S, make sure you save that. You can export that and make sure you submit it for me. If you have any questions, good luck. We'll do a I'll come very shortly.